All right, we're back. Another edition of Kevin's Corner. I'm recording this from my car outside of the Colts complex in between media availabilities and their, first non-training camp practice here of 2025. It'll be Daniel Jones with the first unit when they go out there here in a few minutes, and that is the plan for the foreseeable future. Anthony Richardson will be the backup to start this season, and Daniel Jones has won the quarterback competition. Shane Steichen announced that on Tuesday morning at a press conference. A lot of areas we can go with this. I'll just start generally. 2.5 years into the Anthony Richardson experience, it's been an utter failure in development, on and off the field. Probably, honestly, more of a misevaluation rooted in the scouting days. You go back to not offering Carolina more to make the overall first choice and not be, handed what was left in Anthony Richardson or Will Levis there in the 2023 draft. And then you could go even further back. But if we just live kind of in the Richardson bubble, I don't care, career arc, guys, whatever, grow in different ways. In year 3 of your NFL career, the most critical year of a first-round pick in terms of financial decisions with that fifth-year team option coming, you're not supposed to be holding a Microsoft Surface, I would say a clipboard, but I probably got to live in the Gen Z area. You're not supposed to be holding the old Microsoft Surface, and that's exactly what Richardson will be doing. And again, it's just it's a misevaluation development at so many levels. And coaching staff-wise, I think there's an element of that. Shane Steichen was bullish on Anthony Richardson. And if you look at, their coaching staff, Jim Bob Cooter and Cam Turner, they have been there throughout this entire process. Whereas, when Chuck Pagano and that staff started to assemble, things around Andrew Luck back in the day, it was, Bruce Arians and Clyde Christensen, slightly different resumes there for those two from an offensive standpoint. I really thought, I'm hoping, based off yesterday's podcast and even last week, you kind of feel my tone changing a little bit here recently in that, I really thought there was, I think, momentum building for Daniel Jones. And some of that, I think, had to do with the Baltimore play, where Richardson takes that sack. And again, there's blame, on him for that play. I think that might have been kind of the final nail in the coffin. And honestly, I brought up, Jones's words after the game on Saturday, Steichen's words after the game on Saturday. I think you could all kind of see it. And, hearing Shane today, basically the root of it had so much to do with the line of scrimmage. And operationally, who do you trust? Staying on track, consistency in that area. And it has less to do with Anthony Richardson's inaccuracy and more to do with that. It is pretty wild to sit here after training camp. Richardson doesn't miss a single team rep. He leads the only touchdown drive of the preseason among the two quarterbacks, and yet he still didn't win. And I would argue that touchdown drive had what you wanted. A lot of, again, methodical, consistent, decisive throws with that. I think Shane's words obviously carry merit. I don't think Shane just decided that he hates Anthony Richardson and boom, he's going to start Daniel Jones. Obviously, there's reasons behind that. And I do genuinely believe he trusts Daniel Jones a lot more at the line of scrimmage, operationally, et cetera, than Anthony Richardson. Having said that, it's just a continued sad indictment on the 4th overall pick from 2023, that's where you are at. Life with Daniel Jones is going to revolve and, very much kind of a game manager type of bubble. And, you'll be betting on the run game. You'll be betting on your offensive line. You'll be betting on Steichen as a play caller. Obviously, improved pass catching group. Certainly the defense taking a jump. That is what the Colts are kind of betting on with this sort of situation. I honestly think it sets up pretty well for Daniel Jones early in the season. I don't know, maybe the fans will boo him coming out of the old tunnel there week 1, but Miami's dealing with a slew of secondary injuries. You get 2 home games right out of the gate. You get a rookie quarterback in week 3. I want to say the Raiders is on there, relatively early in the season as well. If you finally win an opener, they might have a parade for Daniel Jones after that Dolphins game. And like when you hear the word consistency, it's interesting how just so much of Daniel Jones's career has not been that. And, kind of throughout this process, I thought no matter who wins, it's the lesser of two evils. I mean, that's the true winner. I mean, it's not that either of these quarterbacks are great by any means. I asked Quentin Nelson about the general frustration of, being in an organization that's had this much quarterback turnover over the years, and I thought he was very candid in expressing the real frustration that is there. And it's now the continued sort of revolving door. And, part of me thinks that Daniel Jones getting benched in New York almost weirdly saved his career. No one's watched him play football now for the last, year, 10 months. So now, he's okay again. That's kind of where we are at. I thought Daniel Jones made Shane Steichen made an interesting comment about Jones today and just describing how, he grew up in the NFL watching Eli Manning. And this kind of gets back to the Colts and the pieces that they put around Anthony Richardson, back in 2023. There's so many areas that I think the Colts have just screwed up in this process. And I think one of those, again, is what that quarterback room looked around him. Gardner Minshew, he had no business wanting to be a teacher, nor necessarily was the resume him needing to be a teacher for Anthony Richardson. Certainly Joe Flacco, that's the furthest thing he wanted to do. And obviously Daniel Jones is trying to save his career. So, none of this is the Matt Hasselbeck type of influence for Andrew Luck. And given Richardson's just novice, naive, immature quarterback background, I'd argue he needed that, more than anyone. Again, do the Colts have enough around to make this work? And, I largely think the Colts will hover right around 8 or 9 wins. I don't, but at the end of the day, do you feel like you have a quarterback that can make you thrive in the AFC or just survive in the AFC? And that's what you have to ask yourself. Do you have that centerpiece that can make you thrive? I am curious how this impacts Alec Pierce a little bit. We saw Pierce, hit on some deep balls with Jones back in the spring, but we've just seen virtually none of that here during training camp in the preseason. And again, the Colts are going to revolve around this, won 8 games last year, despite having one of the worst defenses in the league, despite being very high in giveaways, and we still won 8 games. We're going to now be better in those areas. And there was part of me that thinks about this and is like, wait a minute, how, if the Giants had this much dysfunction, that's pretty much what the Colts are saying, how in the world did the Colts get blown off the field by the Giants and, lost? I guess they've lost them 2 out of the last 3 years. So, for Richardson, I just don't know how real growth is achieved back in the meeting room. I think there's a misconception in the NFL about how much teams even practice during the regular season. I mean, we know Shane Steichen's a fan of the Wednesday walkthrough days. So, Richardson's running the scout team. He's not even running your own offense when you get in these practice settings. And, Shane mentioned the injury situation several times throughout. And, my question to him in the press conference was, okay, if he had the injuries, it's not like that took him out of the meeting rooms. He was still learning. So he had the injuries as a rookie. You feel like that hindered his growth. That took away his game reps. That didn't take away his meeting reps. Now you're taking away the game reps and you're going back to the meeting reps. I don't, it just doesn't totally add up to me. And, again, for me, so much of this season is about either playing the highest ceiling quarterback and or trying to create clarity around your young quarterback. And I don't think this does it. I assume they won't pick up the 5th-year option. And, Richardson obviously will be beloved around town for this, and we'll see if and when they do turn to him. But the worst-case scenario is Daniel Jones, gets off to a nice start, keeps the starting job throughout. You win 8-9 games. Now you're like, well, I don't really know what we have in Daniel Jones, but he's a free agent and someone will pay him money because it's the NFL and people are desperate for quarterbacks. And do you re-sign him? Are you keeping Shane and Chris? Oh, Anthony Richardson just went an entire year and didn't play. Well, that 5th-year option's due. Now you're stuck in the middle of the draft. I mean, none of that just sounds optimistic in that. I'll follow up with Shane later in the week. I'm a little confused why Richardson doesn't even play on Saturday in the preseason game. You're taking away his reps. Why not play him at least, I don't know, at least a half when you have some sort of notable offensive lineman in the game? I don't, if it's all about line of scrimmages and operational stuff, can't he learn that in a little bit of a preseason setting for you? But it sounds like it'll be Riley Leonard and Jason Bean throughout that final game there in Cincinnati. So I think that probably covers kind of my general thoughts. I know a lot of this we've talked about for a long, long time, so it's kind of rehashing some of it now that we have a final answer. Again, I always felt like Shane Steichen was more open-minded to Daniel Jones than maybe people wanted to fully realize, fully admit. I tried to make that come across on the podcast, and I think you're obviously seeing that play out. And again, you have to make a quicker financial decision on Jones than you do Richardson, which I think is another kind of weird angle to this. Jones is the true free agent. Richardson is not. You've got him under team control for at least 26, and if you would like, 27 as well. That's the fifth-year team option you must decide upon in May. So, 2 17-year-olds, 16-year-olds you don't trust with the keys. It's a lesser of two evils, and you went with the safer one. And safe has a ceiling, and to me, defined ceilings don't have a place in the AFC for long-term growth. And that's where you're at. We're still talking about a conference that had quarterbacks in Joe Burrow and Tua, hell, even Trevor Lawrence, not make the playoffs this past season. And, if you're sitting in New England right now, you feel pretty good, about where your quarterback is. I'm not going to go yet to Tennessee or anything like that because I think it's unfair. We got to see some of these guys in the NFL, but it's just such a loaded conference with where you're at from a quarterback standpoint. So I think that probably covers everything on my end. We'll get to Twitter questions a little bit more down the road. I know several of you sent them in, but I just kind of wanted to get raw thoughts of the Shane Steichen decision on here. Anthony Richardson was asked about. He I think expressed frustration in kind of an Anthony Richardson way. I say that off of 3 years of hearing him talk and not necessarily from anything he might have said today. I don't think there was necessarily a juicy quote today. The whole trade answer, he oftentimes referred to God and that sort of angle to it. And, I thought he said stuff that you would want to, but I just sensed obvious frustration that you would have from him. So the Colts will bet on their others. They will bet on a Sam Darnold, Geno Smith, Baker Mayfield revival, try to make that work in a conference where we have not really seen that work at all here over recent years, and we'll see if they impress Carly Gordon enough to remove 2026 quarterback from the offseason checklist in terms of the draft. I'm Kevin Bowen, signing off Colts Corner. Thanks for listening.